Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. Happy Friday the 13th. All right, we are doing a special episode of the show. And what better way to celebrate Friday 13th by doing a show on a sequel of the original Friday 13th? Now, if you have been with us for a while, you'll know that we've already done an episode on the original 1980 Friday 13th. So we are doing an episode on part two from 1981. And to do or help me try and understand the intricacies of this sequel is Dave Watkins. Thank you, Dave, for joining us on the show today.
What's up, man?
All right. So I know a lot of you out there are huge fans of the Friday 13th franchise, and then there are a lot more people out there who probably have barely scratched the surface on watching all these sequels that came about. Because
I think most people have probably watched the first 8 in a marathon at some point. I would think.
I will not deny that I have watched them as a marathon myself.
But the first 8, but after that, it kind of, if you try to go past that in a marathon, you're going to be in bad shape, I think.
Yeah, you're going to be in bad shape. That being said, before we get into our background with this film in particular, I do have to preface everyone out there that the Friday the 13th franchise has never been one of my favorites. I kind of have seen them and didn't care for any of them really until part 6, and then went back and had to watch them to kind of get myself kind of a leg up in there. That being said, if you've listened to our podcast on the original 1981, you'll realize that it's one of the most iconic franchises out there, one of the most iconic monsters or slashers or however you want to place them in that pantheon nowadays, because I see little kids in Jason costumes every year. It's the craziest thing. But first of all, after I've said that preface, because I don't want to say, I don't want anyone who knows my bias against the film or for the film. Just know that I haven't bothered with these films as much as
I guess as to piggyback on that, I think that, like, to me, it's like there's 3 '80s horror movie icons. You got Freddy and Michael and Jason. And those are the 3 big ones. There's also like Leatherface and Pinhead and Chucky, but those are the 3. To me, those are the 3 big ones. And Jason, as far as the way that he looks with a hockey mask, he didn't really get his shit together until the 4th one for the first time. He appears with a hockey mask in the 3rd one, but not until like almost an hour into it. But they didn't really make him an icon until really the 3rd one. But this one's interesting because of that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Part 2 is the one I remember the most. Growing up, more so than the first one or the 3rd one or even the 4th one, and definitely more than the 5th one. Mostly because it had so many people in it, and they kind of, for me, this one had that ambiance where it was there. It's a campfire. They had that little campfire story about the legend of Jason, and
right. Course, and they reused that in the opening of like part 4. They do that in this one. This one's an hour and 26 minutes long, and the first 6 minutes of it is a clip show of some of the scenes from the end of the first one.
Yeah, but the thing is, I went to camp when I was a kid, and I always thought that was the cool opening to have that. I have no idea if I watched these movies in order or not when I was a kid. I simply don't remember how I watched these films until part 6 came out. Part 6 came out, and I actually wanted to see that at the theater because the trailer was awesome. Alice Cooper did the song for it. It was a cool fucking movie. I never really kind of watched them closely before that movie came out. I don't know about you. Well,
I think as a kid, I was more aware of them in the mythology, not necessarily the mythology. I guess there's some mythology, but as far as like the chronological order of the evolution of Jason, because for me, that was what kids were talking about, was Jason, and that was the hockey mask Jason. That's what everyone's dressing up as, like you're saying. Mm-hmm. And so I did see the first one first, but then after that, it was probably the 4th one I saw first, which I think is, to me, it's probably the best one. That and 6 are the 2 best ones. But the thing about the first one and the first one's the only one that takes place at Crystal Lake for the main location of the film.
Yeah.
Every other one doesn't take place there, which is something that didn't really think about until watching this. This one actually takes place at a different camp altogether, like a counselor and training camp. It's a pack of something. Damn,
I didn't write down. I didn't write down either, but I didn't know. You're right. I didn't notice it either until rewatching it. When I was a kid, I didn't pay any attention to the details of these films, and it's been a long time since I've sat through all of these movies. A long time. But when I was rewatching it, I started paying attention to that stuff, because what better way to do that than the show here? To be honest with you, these films are not films that were like, you don't watch them for critique and analysis. I mean, it's not. You don't study these films because they simply have a purpose of being slasher films, where people eventually in the franchise, people just watch them to see how Jason kills his next victim, and people care less and less and less about the victims as this series goes on.
Well, I will say though, this one is unique. It is a little different than that, because this is the first one that has Jason as the killer, and they actually what's interesting about it, and also kind of frustrating, the end of the first one, the mom's the killer, Jason's mom's the killer, and she gets killed. Jason was dead the whole time. It's kind of like he was the kid that drowned in the lake, and the mom was mad that he drowned in the lake, and then she started like killing counselors. That was the whole thing, that he was dead. Here he's not dead, but they made a good call. They made a call that made a horror movie icon. But if you were thinking about it from the first one, if like say Tom Savini and the creators of the first one like thought they had like a movie that was self-contained, and it didn't need a sequel, and they thought they'd made a masterpiece, they thought they'd made like Psycho or something, you know. And even though Psycho has 3 sequels as well, but but no one knows about it. I mean, they don't think about the Psycho sequels. But they thought they'd made a film that was self-contained, and then suddenly someone's like, "Hey, Jason is now the killer," and they're like, well, "Jason was dead. He's the whole reason for the first movie to exist." But not that I'm a fan of Jason, but I'm okay with them that they did that. But I can see their point of view from that first one. But what makes it interesting is that Jason is now a person who wears a sack over his head, and one sack. Now, I'm going to get slightly off the tangent for a second, but you ever seen that movie called The Town That Dreaded Sundown, 1976? Yes. Yeah, it's when you see it, that's what that looks like to me. It's a very similar concept, but I still like the way that the sack looks. It looks pretty scary, really, and it's like a white sack over his head, and then it shows up pretty good at dark. You don't see him very good with a sack over his head until near the end, and then you do see a lot of him on screen for quite some time.
Yeah.
But getting back to what happens, it makes it interesting in this one because it is kind of an establishment of a new killer, and it is in a way a kind of a remake of the first one, where you have the same thing happen, like new counselors in training, and they're basically some counselors in training, and then their first day, and then they run afoul of Jason, and then he starts picking them off one at a time.
And that's the crazy thing. I didn't realize that literally the movie only takes place in like 2 days. The first day when they arrive, and then the second day when they're all killed.
It's like, what's interesting though, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one all take place like a day apart from each other. So they're all like the same type of, in a way, continuity, and those are like the 3 that have the most continuity than any of the Friday the 13th films.
Yeah, when I rewatch the fourth one, I'll have to look into that, since we only did Friday 13th.
Well, I think yeah. Well, 2 and 3 are directed by the same director too.
Yeah, Steve Miner, but Steve Miner only wrote the second one. I was like, why did he write the third one if he wrote the second one? Or maybe they were writing them simultaneously or something. I'm not sure. I thought it was kind of weird though.
Right. Yeah. But I do feel, we'll talk about 3, I guess, in another podcast. But 3 and 2 are very similar to each other. They feel that way a lot because of I think the same director doing them. But there is some uniqueness to 3. There's also a uniqueness to this one in that he has that sack over his head, and it doesn't show him for a very long time into the film. I do like the characters in this film. I do like the way the characters are written, like the counselor characters.
So the one thing I didn't notice about this film that I don't think they did in later films is that you see a bunch of counselors at the very first day,
Yeah,
and for the most part, a lot of them don't even die by the end of
yeah,
the film. Even the one guy you think is going to die, Ted, who's like the person who lives in the area, who knows about the Jason legend and all that type of stuff, he's too busy getting drunk at the bar when they all
yeah.
had that last night out. And he doesn't die, and you're kind of thinking he will die, and he doesn't die.
Yeah, well, that is very unique to this one. I don't think it's ever happened in any other
I
ones. It
don't
does
think so
remind me
either.
of like Sleepaway Camp, like where there's a lot of characters and only like some of them die. But the horror trope that eventually happened in this and most of these films is everybody has to die except
Mhm.
for the last couple of people, and even like in say the movie Alien, which has similar scenario where like pretty much you see everybody on screen. They're all like counselors and they're all going to be killed. There would have been a lot of deaths in this scene in this movie had they all gotten killed because there's a lot of counselors in frame when it shows them all meeting.
It
Yeah,
it would end up like Jason Takes Manhattan, where there's so many characters, and Jason's killing a new character every 5-10 minutes. As ridiculous as that movie
yeah.
was, because everybody
Yeah,
dies.
yeah, yeah. I like it too though. That I do like that though. I like it. I don't. I mean, I don't like it I mean, the trope where everybody has to get killed. I mean, I think it's like I like it that some of the people escape death, and like half of them, if not more than that, because it was only like 6 of them stay behind or something, and then the two people running it like go out and drink, but then they come back and have to face him. But I do like it because they all basically they all the counselors go out and get drunk at the bar, and then they all stay out all night so that they're able to escape.
Death.
Getting slaughtered by
So
Jason.
what? So what I did like about this film, and this is, I think this is one of the few films that I think one of the other, I think maybe part 6 does this too. I can't remember anymore. When I rewatch them, I'll be able to remember more. But
Yeah,
this one does a really good job setting up the myth, the kind of like the legend of Jason at the very beginning for anyone who may have never seen the first film. But it also does a really good job on kind of explaining away a lot of the inconsistencies because they mentioned that Jason must have been growing up as a living in the wild, and then of course you see his shack that where he keeps his head of his mother
yeah,
as a shrine. Um,
yeah. It's pretty
it,
cool, though, really, that part.
so that whole myth and legend thing kind of is built in this one as opposed to kind of like what happens in the third film. And I wish I could remember the fourth one. I don't.
Well, yeah, I remember the fourth one. That's my favorite, actually, or probably one of my 2 favorites. But the fourth one has it again. They basically re-show the campfire scene from this one.
Did they?
They show
Okay.
scenes from they show scenes from all the other films, and they make it guess makes sense. I mean, within it, it's like they make it make sense within the first 4 films. They basically take everything and then they build it there. I mean, and even like going forward until they lost rights to it, they kind of kept it. They kind of kept it pretty good, and they cared about the continuity a little bit for a while. It wasn't until like maybe. I guess Jason Goes to Manhattan. Maybe it started losing it, but
Well, he
yeah,
wasn't scary by that time. I remember when that came out. He wasn't scary at that time.
yeah.
A
It was just
poster was
fun at that
scary.
point. I mean, it's fun, but the other ones are fun. Like Freddy versus Jason, Jason Goes to Hell, and Jason X. They're just fun at that point. They're just like goofy and silly, and they don't give a shit that much. They actually lost rights to the continuity too. Like New Line lost rights, so they couldn't really keep the continuity because yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I think what New Line did like 3 of the films, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves because I don't think Sean S. Cunningham, who directed the first one, had anything to do with this one. I can't remember if I remember seeing his name on the
Yeah,
credits.
but they still had the rights to the movie at the time.
Yeah,
They could use like scenes from the first film, and
yeah,
they could reference the mom and all that, and kind of make them all tie together. And they were working on the in that way. Not that there's not that there's anything too deep about it, but at least they could connect it and do and build that myth a little bit.
yeah. The great things about old school '80s movies and sequels, where they all thought that everything had to connect and continuity was an important issue, unlike nowadays where continuity gets thrown out in franchises because they can. Let's
Yeah, I
reboot
mean,
it.
yeah, I mean, I think the continuity gets thrown out, but they did try. I think they wanted. Sometimes continuity is for a filmmaker going into a sequel. It is a creativity killer because they have to adhere to certain continuity, and sometimes when you lose the continuity, though, you lose the film as well. But it does hurt the creativity because it pigeonholes you into having to follow these rules that were already set in some instances.
Mm. Well, thankfully with this one, they were starting off from scratch by having Jason be the killer and not bringing back his mother, just her head. Uh,
Yeah. Which I think that we should go all the way back to the beginning of the movie where a new horror movie trope is born. So
yeah.
where the actress, the final girl from the first film, has a brief cameo appearance in it, and she
Hmm.
gets like third billing in the opening credits as well. But she's in it for well,
Alice,
maybe yeah,
Al-
Alice, and she's in it like well, a lot of it's a clip show, but she's in it maybe the first like 8 minutes of the film, but a lot of it's like a flashback to the first film. But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was about to say the opening I found hilarious because I don't think I ever noticed that it starts off with a little girl hopscotching and all you do is see her feet, and then she gets called in for by her mother, and she steps out of frame, and immediately Jason steps in the frame, and I'm like, how does this little girl not see some raggedy guy with a sack over his head, like 2 steps next to her? And I'm laughing. I'm already started laughing at the movie because I'm like, this is a filmmaking thing and not such a logical thing. Because I'm pretty sure that girl would have saw this guy with a sack over his head, much less
No,
explain how Jason even found out where Alice lived outside of Crystal Lake.
right. And this is like the only time in the franchise that he leaves the area to do this type of shit. I mean, he obviously goes to Manhattan and hell and space later, but in as far, before they did all that, he pretty much stayed around the area of Crystal Lake. He didn't like go all the way to a suburbs to track somebody down. Pre-internet, I guess you know what I think it is. I think he's kind of like can smell like a dog, and he can track her. He was able to track her to where she lives.
And he's carrying his dead mother's head with him. I
Yeah,
that he puts in the refrigerator.
yeah,
Now that was actually a cool scene, but
yeah.
it's just a weird. When you think about logic, and I guarantee you, I didn't think about this when I was a kid. You think about logic now, it's like, oh my god, this is so hokey and ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever. I mean, I didn't think it was hokey or ridiculous. I thought it was out of place, even back then, because I always associated Jason with the area, the woods, Camp Crystal Lake, and here he is in a suburban neighborhood, walking down the street, tromping through a mud puddle, and then it's very Michael Myers like, other than
It
the
is.
shit.
It's
And
very
it's
much
like,
like Myers.
yeah, they're trying to be like Michael Myers. He shows up at the house. The house even looks a little bit like the Myers house, and she's in there on the phone, and but they basically made a new trope where the final girl from the previous movie gets killed in the first scene of the next film,
Yeah.
which is I don't like the trope very much, but I mean, I would like to see her. I would like to see this never happened except for the character of Tommy Jarvis, but they never brought like with a hero or usually like a woman from the previous film. They never brought the character back for a substantial part in any of the films. I mean, they did at least brought her back briefly for this one, but then to kill her. But then only most of the other ones, like the final girl, you don't see her again. But
No.
they always had plans to do it. The directors of each of the films like there was one like part 7 where she is like Carrie like got like kinetic powers and
Hmm.
fights and stuff, and they always wanted to bring that character back to play them again. They even wanted to bring the character back from the second film But when they went into the third film, it was just kind of like they couldn't really tire into. They wanted to use the location Crystal Lake again. They actually wanted to put it in a sanitarium, and that would have gone. I think that would have gone south pretty bad, you know, because we've seen those a lot of times, like in sequels where the character who survives ends up in a sanitarium, and you don't know whether or not they're imagining the killer coming back or not coming back, and so I'm glad they didn't go that route. I think it would have crashed and burned earlier than it did.
Kind of like Halloween Resurrection, who did that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Jesus, that's you're right. That's a trope that a lot of franchises eventually did adopt at some point.
I
Um,
think I think though with this though, and what's hilarious, I think that the filmmakers didn't want to tell the same story over and over again about these teenagers getting killed by Jason, but that was like all the audiences wanted. That was all they gave a shit about, you know. And that's what I think that's what they kind of didn't understand because they were feeling pigeonholed. They're like, do we really have to write this again with these counselors? Like these group of like teenagers coming together and then like one by one getting killed by Jason, and it's like as I think as a I mean, I'm more about the plot now, but I think, I remember like as a teenager or even preteen, it was all about each of the individual kills and how he killed the person, and it's just like that was what mattered. Not like if they would put him in a sanitarium, it wouldn't have been cool at the time.
I think you're absolutely right. I kind of think the filmmakers kind of adopted what they thought audiences wanted and craved, and that's what kind of dictated what happened in this franchise more so than Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween.
Yeah.
It took a while between the third Halloween and fourth Halloween when they went back and said, "Okay, the fans want Michael Myers. Let's just do it." You know.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I think I don't think it. Yeah, I think that was always what fans wanted something which was really simple and it was really like easy to do, but filmmakers wanted to be creative.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like we got to do something. We can't just do the same shit again. But
And
I mean, I understand that too from a filmmaker perspective, but
yeah.
it's just funny when they don't understand the audience. But eventually they did. Eventually they did get it. They're like, okay, well, we got to do it again. We're gonna have to do the same shit again. That's the only way we're gonna make money.
And they take him to Manhattan, and then they take him into space, and they, of course, get Jason goes to hell. So,
Yeah, yeah.
oh,
But all of that though, I mean that I like those films, but I mean I think that they they didn't like they I don't think the fans like that idea. I know I kind of checked out with Jason Goes to Space. I eventually did rewatch it like for the first time maybe a few years ago, and I actually do like that film. I think it's friggin' hilarious and it's a lot of fun. But I think at the time it came out, I was really rejecting that they were doing that at that point. I watched Jason Goes to Hell. I was fine with it. A lot of people hate that film. Like
yeah.
a lot of people put that as their least favorite of the franchise, but it's like they did a really good job when they did the remake as well. I thought it was quite good. It's one of the better ones of the franchise.
No, I agree with you on the remake. I was always surprised that they never made a sequel to it. And then, of course,
Yeah,
if anyone's listening and they know, the rights for Friday 13th were all screwed up over the last, I don't know how many freaking years. Thankfully, they finally have fixed that whole rights issue, who owns what and all that kind of crap. And so now they'll start making television shows and new movies, hopefully.
yeah. That's what they're going to the TV show. They might get caught up in the TV show, and it might be as far as it goes. But
Who knows?
yeah, what's funny about this franchise though, this one did really good in the theater. I think it made like 20 something $1 million with a $1.5 million budget, so it
Mhm.
did really good. They've all done pretty good. It's just I guess it was just kind of hard to keep the momentum going, and that rights issue, even like they didn't make a sequel
The
to
remake.
the remake because of the rights issue, but that one made money. It's just like they had
Yeah.
a real big issue with the rights and who owned it and who had the rights to do certain things. They'd always been struggling with that ever since. ever since part 8. Well, actually, it was earlier than that. I think it was. It may have been. Yeah, I'm trying to. I think it may have been part 7. They really started to struggle with the rights issue, not being able to bring back the Tommy Jarvis character again, who's becomes kind of like they have like the characters originally played by Corey Feldman. Every time he's played by a different actor, but
Yeah.
it's like the protagonist of the films that's only protagonist who's in 3 different films, played by 3 different actors. But they eventually they kept wanting to bring him back, but then they weren't able to. They're trying to make almost like an Ash character for the series. I mean, they really needed that though. I think for this series really needed like a hero character.
Yeah.
And it could have been any of the surviving characters really, but I think Tommy Jarvis is a strong contender. But even that the Carrie one would have been good. But I don't know if most of the other characters before that. I don't. I mean, they're mostly like I mean, there were women who were kind of equipped to fight him. I don't know if they had special skills to keep fighting him though. The protagonist of this one, I think she's a psychology major and she's like a counselor in training, but she does fight him and pretty good near the end of it. She's able to get away from him. She's able to outsmart him. She she finds his mom's from the stories that she heard. She finds his
Yeah.
mom's head and puts her sweater on and makes him think that she's his mom. So even this character could have like continued on, but then not in a sanitarium. They would have completely killed it if they did that. But yeah, I mean, it's hard though. It's hard. A lot of these sequels, even like in Nightmare on Elm Street, when they have the hero characters, like they have the hero characters from the third one, the Dream Warriors that I loved, the Dream Warriors. I thought that was fucking awesome. And
Mhm.
then the next one, they immediately kill them all, like almost like right, maybe 30 minutes they're dead before like the second act of the film. But I don't know, like these horror films, unlike The Evil Dead, they knew that the draw for the audience was the killer, and if they had these like the Evil Dead, they have Ash who's the draw for the audience, but he's against the Evil Dead, who's a lot of different types of monsters and not just one specific monster. So I guess it makes it hard to have a returning character because you might lose some suspense about whether they're going to get killed or not. Of course, this one kind of right away makes you know that the returning character is not going to do too good.
All bets are off. I think that
Yeah.
was kind of the impression they were giving with this film. Is like, even though you survived the first film, all bets are off. You don't know if you're going to survive, if you're going to bring you back for this one, so that the audience doesn't know who's going to live, and who's going to die. Jenny, who's the main one in this film, because she's the smartest one, and she's the one that questions the validity of the myth at the bar when they're all supposed to be taking a break and chilling and drinking. She's the one asking Ted and her friend, the other camp counselor, I can't remember his name, the questions about whether or not Paul, thank you, if the legends could be true, and what if there was someone out there who lived and she's using that psychology major to think about this, which helps her when she decides to dress up in Jason's mother's outfit and trying to psych him out. And I think that's what makes her one of the stronger characters in this particular film, because none of the other characters are thinking like that. They're all thinking like, "Oh, summer job, Camp Kelson, woo, party fun."
Yeah, yeah. There's actually there's there's a character in a wheelchair. His last name's Jarvis too, Mark Jarvis. Apparently, that doesn't have any relation to Tommy Jarvis, who was in part 4, 5, and 6. But I think it's like they almost had that last name. Somebody they must have known had that last name, and they're like, "That's a cool last name. Let's name him Jarvis." But he's in a wheelchair, and it's reminiscent of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre because the guy in the
Oh,
wheelchair in that, which is. But that guy in this film, it's pretty cool in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. But he has, to me, I think the best death scene. He's out on the outside of the cabin. Jason comes up behind him. He hits the machete into his head. He's got the machete sticking out of his head, and then he rolls backwards down the stairs. It's an awesome kill there.
you mentioned that, and you are absolutely correct. But you know what's missing from most of these, the second and third film, is they're not very gory deaths in
Yeah.
these films. They don't have that Tom Savini flair from the first film.
I was reading about that, and I thought that same thing. Like it often cuts away just when it could
Uh-huh.
be getting to the good part, but it's because of the censors. They had to a lot of it got censored. They
Really?
shot more shit. Yeah, there's more. It just didn't make the film.
See, I have a
Like
couple of work print copies of some of the Friday 13th. Like I have a work print copy of part four, part five, and then I
yeah,
think part seven, which has a
yeah,
lot more stuff in it.
yeah.
I've never looked it for like a work print of the second or third one, so I've never seen those.
I don't know if it exists or not, but I was reading about it. It says they had to censor some shit. There's like the scene where the two teenagers are having sex and fairly likable though. That girl especially, like it's one of the earlier people that they see, and she's real spunky acting. But they're having sex, and he comes in and he impales them, and it just kind of he goes to do it, and it cuts to the bottom of the bed, and it comes through into the floor, which is I mean that's good enough. But apparently they shot more stuff. It was more gruesome, but they had to cut it out.
Uh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I always thought there was more blood in these movies than I actually remembered. And that could be because I just haven't watched them in so long. And
Yeah, well, a lot of these I saw on regular television where they were edited, so I always assumed while watching them that I was watching something edited, but a lot of it is already edited to begin with, but they get past the censors of the 1981 at the time
oh,
to get an R rating. Um, yeah, there's also like this one girl who is got a dog and she wears this. First time you see her, she's got a Mickey Mouse shirt on and it's like really far up. It's like her. I don't know how her boobs aren't popping out of that thing, but she gets another. She puts another shirt on. And it's like the same cut. It's like and she has no bra on. It's
and she's supposed to
but
be getting taken serious, but I think
yeah,
well, oh shit, I can't remember her name. I wrote it down too because her
yeah,
dog that she has to go check search out for, which is hilarious to me.
yeah.
Oh my god! But go ahead.
Yeah, and she's also friends with like this other one named her name's Vicky. The one that the other girl's name's Vicky.
Yeah,
Now her name's Terry. The one with the shirt's named Terry, and then she has a friend named Vicky. But the Terry one with the weird shirt almost seems like she could be like bi maybe, or even like a lesbian to me. But the way, especially when she's sitting next to the other girl, like she just seems like she just kind of gives me that vibe a little bit. They don't go into it, but she never see her. She is like there's another guy that's kind of trying to hit on her or he's pulling practical jokes on her, but she never like tries to like hang out with the guys or really even the girl either. There's no true evidence to that. I just kind of got that vibe a little bit when I was watching it.
you got that vibe now because of the not an '80s vibe, but more of a kind of a current kind of vibe, like in today's world. You would think that, or back then, I just kind of thought that the guy who hits on her was just a sleazy guy, and she just
Yeah.
wasn't giving him the time of day.
Right, and that guy's like a not he's that guy seems fairly charismatic too. The actor playing him, he almost seems like too charismatic to be playing that character. But and he doesn't get a lot of screen time. But he first shows up, you're like, wow, that must be the main character, the way that he looks. Yeah. But
Go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say that now it is like her that guy does get caught upside down in a trap that Jason
Mhm.
has out in the woods, and at that point she's going to go help him. But before that happens, she just randomly by herself decide to go skinny dipping. It's like takes
In the
all her
middle
clothes
of the
off.
night, you
Yeah,
would think that she would be the character that would go skinny dipping in the middle of the night without another man or a female friend there, but
yeah,
she just does.
yeah. It's for the camera.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but even it doesn't show it that good though. It's all profile or kind of even it's not even really back. It's more profile, but I would have like the way the shirt was. You would almost have liked to seen it come off from the front.
I don't think we get stuff like that until the later Friday 13th films where they didn't care about nudity. I think Jason
Yeah,
X probably has actual nudity in it, if I remember correctly.
yeah. But a lot of times they don't like. Even then, it's like they don't really. You can't show it for too long. The censors are gonna block it. They might have even shot more for that. But she comes and finds the guy hanging upside down, and she tries to help him. Comes back but before she comes back, Jason shows up and slits the dude's neck. And she comes back and he's dead. And then they really missed opportunity though. She turns around and he kills her, but it doesn't show anything. And
No, she just
so yeah.
screams.
yeah, that was just a wasted kill, especially for that character. Not, I mean, I thought that, and then her friend, who is Vicky,
Vicky.
and that's something about this film too, where it's like Vicky, she's a very like shy kind of girl who's like more sensitive, and she could be the main character, and her and Jenny, or both, either one of them could have been the main character, and it would have been, it was fine for this film, but when it got into the third one and they did the same dynamic again, that was when it kind of would have been like, you should have changed the main character in the next one, kind of a surprise. But the way that they have these two characters, like either one of them, as it's going, could have been the main character until they're not anymore.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that too, because she's the innocent one who's feeling attracted to the wheelchair bound character, Mark.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
think that, yeah, and when all the other people get killed, before she gets killed, she gets to see a lot of the bodies of her friends, which is usually what happens to the final girl. At least that's the
right.
trope that becomes a cliche in a horror film trope. All the bodies disappear mysteriously, but at the very end, the final girl, all the bodies are revealed in front of the final girl before she has to fight off the slasher dude. That became the trope. But in this film, she's the one who sees most of the bodies beforehand.
Right.
And yeah, it makes for a much more interesting thing, because I don't think Jenny sees too many bodies, because she sees the tub full of bloody clothes, which also doesn't make any sense. What the fuck is Jason putting bloody clothes in the freaking tub for? I just noticed that for the first time watching this, like, oh yeah, it doesn't make any fucking sense. He's spending time doing that, and it doesn't make any sense.
Well, he had to wash them for later. I don't know.
He's
But
not.
she does see now. There's another returning character in the film, Crazy Ralph.
Yeah.
She does find Crazy Ralph's corpse Jenny does in the closet. But that character from the first one, who's the one that's like everyone's doomed and all this, he's
Mhm.
only in it briefly. He appears in, I think, three scenes plus the one he's dead. But yeah, but he dies pretty early. It's like but basically any of the returning characters get killed for the most part.
Mhm.
But a lot of that too helped with him getting killed the way that he gets killed, because like you can't start killing off the counselors yet, because then they start noticing something's awry.
Yeah.
And if you kill off people they don't give a shit about, or if they don't even know or hanging around, then you can kill people without drawing attention to everybody else. So I mean that's a script writer thing, but it's like
Yeah.
you gotta like as you gotta pace it a little bit, because once somebody's killed who's part of the group, then they're like, where the hell did they go? And they start looking for them, and then it's a whole other thing, all of a sudden.
Except for the very first Friday 13th, where the counselor was killed on the road, and
Yeah.
then the rest of them just don't realize. They just say, "Oh, she hasn't shown up yet. She never shows up."
Well, I think that's a pretty common thing. People are oftentimes flaky. Like if you're in
Yeah.
a situation like this, like somebody's going to flake out. You have that many people showing up. You're probably going to have one or two people just not show up.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, fuck them. Their loss.
Oh,
They're
geez.
not good.
So, oh my god. I'm thinking about some of the other aspects of the film, because we're doing a good job of skipping through and kind of bringing stuff from other sequels into this one, because this is the film where Jason does not have his mask yet. The iconic
Right.
mask is not there. He's in a sack mask. Do you think that whole sack mask was effective for the second film, or do you think that it didn't really become effective until he got the hockey mask? Because that really makes this either scary or not scary for people who may or may not have seen this film before.
I think that people are going to be disappointed if they don't know about the sack mask. I was when I was younger. I think it's scary looking though. It's not the hockey mask for sure. And the actor playing Jason's much smaller than the actors had him playing after this.
Mm.
He's a smaller dude, but not that he's not scary. I think there's a lot of scenes near the end of this where he's chasing the main characters. These like pretty cool scenes where she goes into the woods and she's trying to hide from him, and he runs through the woods, and it's like very It's very, I mean, it's very intense, really. All that stuff to me. If you think about it in the right sort of mind, you could think about it and watch it and think it's cheesy. You don't believe it, but if you're thinking about that sort of thing actually happening, and I think it's pretty effective for the most part. It's a little disappointing for if you're expecting the hockey mask, but I think it's still pretty cool. The pitchfork's cool, and then he's got the pitchfork, he's got the axe.
Well, what's very interesting about this film is that when I was a kid and I saw this and saw the first one, and the first one doesn't have Jason, and this one, I remember at one point, and this could be the first couple times I saw the movie, I kind of didn't really think it was Jason, to be honest with you. It could have been anyone in the freaking woods who just was a hermit in a fucking shed somewhere. I mean, until you see like the mother's head in the shrine, which they keep hidden for a huge amount. What's the first person who walks in there?
It's a cop. A cop goes in there.
The cop
That's a
goes,
pretty cool death scene too. He takes a hammer and he puts it into the back of the dude's head. It's just
yeah.
pretty cool.
So the cop sees something, but the audience doesn't know what it is yet. I remember being really shocked the first time I saw it. It's kind of like when you watch part 5, when you realize it's not Jason. It's one of those type of things. Where
you just ruined part 5 for everybody.
I don't think I ruined
part 5. Ruined part 5 for itself, I think.
But that's kind of like the concept I had when I first watched this. Now, I for years, I think up until part 7, not part 8, part 7, I did like a little marathon of these movies, but they were always in the background, so I never paid any real attention to them really. Part 6 and 7 were the two that I actually really liked a lot.
I agree with that. Those two are very strong ones.
So the everything before that was kind of like, oh, okay. As a kid, when you're a kid, you always want to watch them all. You just don't want to watch like part 6 by itself. I gotta watch 5 other ones to get to part 6, and I know I paid no attention to part 5 because I knew that wasn't Jason. I was like, we'll play it, but I'm not gonna pay any attention to it. But I like a lot of the stuff that's in this one, despite the fact that Jason has a sack over his head, and I don't have that suspension of disbelief like I used to when I was a kid, which you kind of miss, and so I kind of wish or would like to know what someone watching this for the first time was thinking about when they saw part 2 after watching part 1, because having a sack mask is a very scary notion. He gets the hockey mask in the third one. You don't really see him get the hockey mask. He just appears with it on.
Right. Well, he gets it from one of the characters in the film, but you don't see him put it on. You also don't see the sack mask in the third one either. They take it off. They take it off his head in this one at the end. And his Jason looks like that character from the Goonies. What is the name of that character? Like that, that Chunk's like friends with that they find.
I can't remember his name. I know what you're talking about though. Yeah. He looks like that's really good. Yeah, that's a really good point. He looks very much like him, except with more freaking hair on his which always looks. I wish they just kept the sack on him the entire time.
It looks well. In this one, you only see him briefly without the mask on, and you see him. It's really a dream sequence, which may or may not have happened, but there is something really weird that happens at the end of this film with that dream sequence. So it's like it's kind of like you don't know exactly what happened. It happens at the end of this film. It's kind of hard to tell what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think that I'm going to throw this out there, but like in part 5, they kind of did the sanitarium one with part 5. That was their sanitarium. Okay, we're going to do it now because Tommy Jarvis is in the sanitarium house. But the way that this goes after the final girl. At one point Jason fights the guy Paul, who's the main dude at the camp, and it's her boyfriend, and he fights him, and you don't see him get killed, but then he shows back up and saves her at the end, and then he brings her out of the house. He brings her into another cabin, and then the dog shows up, and the dog is killed earlier, which that's pretty messed up. He kills the dog, the little cute foo dog, and he's like kills the shit out of it. But the dog shows back up, and it's like, wait a minute, when that dog killed, and then he busts through the window, and then she wakes up, and all that was a dream, and she's on a gurney, and she's killed Jason, it seems, but
And
has she
Paul,
really?
yeah, and they don't mention what happened to Paul because she's still thinking
Yeah,
that Paul was alive and she's calling out for Paul. So you're right. Very the dream aspect could be that uh, Paul really did die. Maybe who knows? But
yeah,
that's sort of the question that the film leaves for the audience. Like you don't know what we're playing with you. You know,
yeah.
you don't know what's
Yeah.
going on. She could go crazy. She could be nuts. But it's ending very much like the first film ended with Alice being carted away by the ambulance, and she's being carted away by the ambulance. And who knows what'll hold for the third film? So
Yeah, yeah, it was like it is kind of like they were trying this for a little bit. I think with most of these, it's kind of like the Nightmare on Elm Street ending when you don't know what happened and what didn't happen. You know,
mhm.
the way that that one ends. It seems like they do that, especially in the first three films of this series. It was like you just don't. You can see kind of what could have happened, but you don't. Some things are left unanswered, or like how certain things happen. How did she defeat Jason without the help of Paul?
Mhm.
And and if Paul died when Jason kills him earlier, or when Jason attacks him, if he died during that scene, how did she defeat Jason, and how did she end up on the gurney to be brought out of there? But questions that will never be answered.
They would know. Well, yeah, you could always ask Steve Miner what the hell was going through his brain when he wrote the damn thing. Uh,
Yeah, but yeah, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it wasn't even him for that. I think they probably had to reshoot the ending several different times. They almost always have to do that, and they probably had it a certain way, and then they shot different endings, and they probably put them together to. I mean, it's kind of cool though in a way that you don't know exactly what happened or how it went down. It is kind of it makes it like a kind of open ended in a way.
but though it adds to the myth and the folklore behind Jason, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I think it adds to all of that. I mean, the third film goes even further with that whole concept. But I think this film by itself, I think the sack mask was scarier. It ends on this really weird dreamlike sequence, and then you don't know what the hell to expect for the next film if there is a next film. Hey, it may not even be Jason killing people in the next film. It could be someone else. Who the hell knows? But we all know because it came out a year later.
Yeah, well, yeah, like say it could not. It could be someone else other than Jason because Jason died as a young boy. It also like leads to like maybe it is intended to be a supernatural thing. They obviously eventually get there. They eventually get to like this is a supernatural character, but at first they try to make it like he's not, and you can kill him, but he keeps coming back. But it's kind of left open ended with that, whether he's supernatural, not supernatural. Was he killed as a kid and somehow came back to revenge his mom's death? So, yeah.
I mean, that's the gist of it, really. I mean, the first film is his mother avenging his death, and then the second movie is him avenging his mother's death.
Yeah, they both have very interesting ideas about who they need to kill. That I remember, like when I was younger, it used to be like they're only killing the people who are doing drugs or having premarital sex or whatever, but they don't care who they kill. They're going to kill who's ever there. It don't matter, you know.
It doesn't matter. Oh my God, you're so correct. That was something that came much later in later slasher films, but this was the earliest 80s, 1980, 81, 82. These films right here were like before there became a slasher trope, where they were building the slasher trope with these movies.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
think that and one thing that and this is played pretty good in some of the other ones, especially part four, when when Jason like gets distracted by something, especially like the mom, her acting like she's his mom, and later on the Corey Feldman's character, he's playing Tommy Jarvis, tries to act like he's a younger version of Jason talking to him, but that's like it's an interesting way of stopping Jason in a way because it kind of messes with his psyche. What do
Mhm.
you think about Jason as far as do you think he's like an asshole or what do you think?
It's hard to define Jason before he becomes a zombie in part six because essentially he's a kid who is an invalid or a mentally disturbed, not mentally retarded kid or something is mentally wrong with him,
Yeah.
and he watches his mother get decapitated. So kind of like the story Ginny is told by Paul during the campfire. Ginny, Jason has watches his mother get decapitated, and what does that do to a person? And in this takes place 5 years after that incident. He's living in the wilderness by himself. He's living in a shack by himself. And what do you think he's doing? He's getting revenge on anyone who comes around that campgrounds near his home, so to speak, because they're not at Crystal Lake, and the events in the third movie don't take place at Crystal Lake. They just take place around Crystal Lake, so it's all his territory.
Yeah, and it's been 5 years since the events of the first one, most of this, so it's he's been hanging out in the cabin, checking out his mom's head, you know.
Yeah, it's a little disturbing.
Yeah, he's been hanging out with the mummified head of his mom.
Oh,
There's like the last shot of the film when it cuts back to the cabin, not the cabin, his like shack, and it's got the close up of the mom's head, and it kind of goes in on it, and it looks like, to me, it almost looks like the eyes are about to open, but then they don't. But I've always thought the eyes were about to shoot open to change like everything. That freaking mummified head's like still alive, you know?
oh my god! If it was to be remade nowadays like that, it probably would. I actually don't remember in the remake if we actually see uh Pamela Voorhees' head again.
Yeah. There's a pretty cool scene. I don't think you do, but I think there's a pretty cool scene at the beginning though, where it actually shows the mom's death from that happens in the first film, like a flashback, and it shows Jason as a young boy with her. Yeah, I don't think you do see her head in that one. I don't think he's got a shrine of it. He should have though.
And that's
Yeah.
what I was about to say. You should have. That would make it
Yeah.
much more interesting. I will say this though. There are, and this is for all the real geeks out there who follow Friday 13th, and for a while I did as well. There are some amazing novelizations and books out there that continue more stories about Friday 13th, as well as comic book series out there that continue this. And then they do prequels to Pamela Voorhees when she was still alive and how Jason was when he was a little kid. Some of those stories are very interesting and fill in the gaps of some of what happened in the movies. And I read those when they originally came out, so that's like 15 years ago. So it'd be interesting to revisit those now that I'm revisiting the films to kind of put together the entire story. Because, like I said, I
That's
was
what,
never a huge fan of Friday
right.
13th.
Yeah, that show's supposed to cover that too. It's supposed to be a prequel that takes place
Mhm.
in that. It'll be like the Bates Motel prequel, probably. You see that?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking it's going to be like. But
That was really solid though. But it'll probably be like that shit because you got the mom already. You got the mom's the main character in both of them. You know, so,
yeah, but if Jason's not Jason, Jason's a little kid for the most part of it. Until at some point when Jason drowns, or in theory almost drowns, or however they play that off. And then of
yeah.
course you have, are we gonna wait years before we see Jason, or are they gonna do a time jump, or are they just not gonna deal with it? Uh yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm not. I wish they would just made more movies, but I guess we'll see what happens with it. You know, it'd be nice to see if they did that as a movie instead of a show too. If they just did a movie about it, you know, and then did a sequel to like Jason X after that.
Well, the thing is that right now, with the way the franchises are being done and rebooted multiple times, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it would be real easy for someone to go out there and do a sequel to Part Seven. Well, not really, because Lars Park Lincoln has passed away, unfortunately, last year, I believe.
But yeah, yeah.
But you could do a
He was
sequel.
well, yeah. I mean, and Terry Kaiser's in that film too. Did you see that fan film they did of that? They had her and Terry Kaiser back in it.
That was I have not. I don't think I haven't seen the one that they're in. I've only heard about the Never Hike Alone.
You know,
Uh,
right? That's the one that has Tom Matthews in it, and played Tommy Jarvis in the in part six.
yeah.
But
They Yeah, he was my favorite Tommy Jarvis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I like Corey Feldman, but I like him a lot from
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I agree with that. I always liked him from the Return of the Living Dead
Yeah.
parts. It's just, and first Return of the Living Dead, but yeah, yeah, it's definitely my favorite Tommy Jarvis. The fifth one was kind of unremarkable. I don't think he sucked, but he just didn't. He wasn't Tommy Jarvis for me anyway.
No, I agree with you. No, he just wasn't. Yeah, and that's why I skipped that one so often after I realized it wasn't the real Jason. Um,
Or the real Tommy Jarvis.
the thing is, well, it happened. Now we went off on a tangent and can't remember what our original question was. Um,
We got off into like the series. You've been talking about the prequel to the.
oh yeah, I think they could do this. I think, and I truly do wish and hope that the rights issues have been fucking figured out because
Yeah,
it's a shame that they never did a sequel to the remake. The remake was really solid. It was really good. It was one of the rare ones that was actually pretty fucking decent. And they kind of crammed in a lot of stuff from these first couple films into a
right.
solid remake. Um, I I don't have much hopes for another prequel series. I mean, that's as bad as there's just so many of these prequel series to famous film franchises that either work or they don't work. To
Right.
be honest with you, the only one I thought worked for me was the Hannibal series, mostly, and the Ash
That, that
Evil Dead. That's about it.
right. Even the Hannibal series, I loved that for a while, but it kind of lost steam after a little bit. But it was solid though. I like that one. I even like Bates Motel, but it's Bates Motel is a little different though. I think because you had an actor playing like Norman Bates younger who wasn't like who was able to handle it, to handle the what was going on with it. And not saying that this one's they're obviously going to cast somebody who can do whatever the hell they need him to do, but I just think about Jason isn't Norman Bates. Jason is a friggin' psychotic killer that doesn't say anything. It just kind of like they do a prequel of Leatherface and Leatherface as a kid. It just like it doesn't work that good.
Oh, but was that the Leatherface movie where you're not sure who Leatherface is until the very end?
I don't know, man. Just the idea of Leatherface being a kid and becoming Leatherface. I don't know, man. It might be. I mean, I don't know. We hadn't seen it, but I'm just kind of don't. I don't feel it just hearing about it. I'd rather see him do something else with the franchise, like continue forward instead of backwards with it.
Well, unfortunately for us, we're hoping that will happen. Friday 13th kept its continuity for a really fucking long time, pretty much. Uh, at the end of each beginning of each film up until part eight, kind of was continued from whatever the hell happened to Jason in the previous one, and that was a
Right.
good way of doing that franchise for a very long time, until it was rebooted by New Line with Jason Goes to Hell. Um, but even with those, the what Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X were the New Line Cinema did,
Yeah, the Freddy
um,
versus Jason.
and Freddy versus Jason. They were still continuity wise, they still were solid. They just didn't take place directly after the previous one. They would be
With the
years after
Yeah,
that.
with the continuity, the Freddy versus Jason takes place between Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X, but they were shot out of sequence, but it has to take place between them, or there's no continuity at all.
Oh well, Jason X is in the future, so
Yeah, right, right, right. So it's, I mean, like it gets to a certain point. Like I think the most hilarious one we talked about it before is the Leprechaun didn't give one shit about continuity. It's
that's right. We
and
did.
to the point that to me, I think it's a different Leprechaun in every film.
It's a different
But
level every film.
yeah, but this one, yeah, I mean, they kind of got to that point, and they were doing very high concepts all of a sudden. They
Yeah,
got out of Crystal Lake, and they were spending a lot more money on the sets and the action sequences,
more supernatural, more crazy shit. Yeah, yeah.
and it was just a lot different scenario. It was a lot different. Where these are like build up a suspense, slow kind of build, like you're giving people what they want, seeing people get killed as it goes on, but then it becomes slow build of people getting killed more and more and more, and suddenly you got one person fighting them at the end, and it was usually took place in a cabin or around a lake, so everything was pretty like. I mean, with a section of the third one, which was in 3D, which cost a lot of money, but most of them were didn't cost that much to make them.
No, no. Um, so and we're coming to the end of this one because we have lots more to talk about when it comes to Friday the 13th. But one of the things that is effective, in my opinion, with these earlier films is that from the 80s perspective and the fact that the slasher genre took over the 80s, this film in particular, more so than some of the other ones that came afterwards, was creating what would define what the slasher genre would become. I do think that anyone who's wanting to kind of take a look at kind of the evolution of slasher films needs to watch how it progressed from Friday the 13th Part 1 to Part 2 to Part 3, because those three in particular, they're all three of them are different in a different way. The first one, the mother was the killer. The second one, we see Jason, but he hasn't become the icon that he actually will eventually become. And by the third one, he becomes this icon that is also fan service as well, and audience service. And that's essentially what becomes with a lot of the later slasher films later on in the 80s. They're all trying to create an icon of some types. Horror franchise it is like what they're trying to create with every slasher film that comes out after that point. I think these three films in particular kind of showcase that evolution because they were so early in the 80s before there were.
I'm not even sure that they were trying to create an icon. I kind of feel like it happened, naturally throughout, and by mistake in a way,
Oh no, they're definitely by mistake. Definitely by mistake. But if you're wanting to see that evolution, you watch these three movies in particular, more so than say, Nightmare on Elm Street, which came later. And I can't
Halloween was before this, 1978. Halloween kind of started the whole thing, but Halloween had their shit together from day one. They had Michael Myers as he pretty much appears for the most part. I mean, his mask changes a little bit, but everything about him was kind of already there.
Yeah. And then, of course, the second film was this hodgepodge of creative decisions made due to studio interference and stuff like that. And then, of course, the third film had nothing to do with Michael Myers whatsoever.
Right.
So
yeah.
You couldn't look at those films and kind of see. You couldn't look at those and see the evolution of the slasher film genre. And a lot of people from the 80s like to see that. We all know the 80s were dominated by slasher movies. There were other horror films that were released during this time, of course. But what became the defining genre of the 80s was the slasher genre. There's millions of them.
And Nightmare on Elm Street, though, it kind of took it to it was almost like a monster movie and slasher movie combined, and it's a lot more intricate than the other ones, in my opinion.
Oh yeah,
it's that's probably what my of them. That's probably my more one I go to more my favorite of.
I haven't until we 80. So Nightmare on Elm Street was 84, and Wes Craven. I think Wes Craven was just a brilliant writer to begin with, and he always wanted to tell really much more creative stuff than what most people would give him credit for. Because I did a rewatch of that for another podcast episode, and I was like, wow, this is a much smarter film than I remembered it being.
Especially that first one is really good.
It's really good. And the thing is, unfortunately for me, I was growing up in the 80s, so I didn't pay attention to all these details about really well-written shit. I was like most people back then, I was like, ooh, death, lots of people dying. Cool. That's all I needed.
That one's gruesome, though, in comparison to these Friday the 13th, that Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, they must have gotten to that point in 1984 where it was okay to show more stuff all of a sudden, briefly.
Yeah, briefly.
Because it was like a lot more gruesome than I think about that in like RoboCop. RoboCop is friggin' really gruesome.
Is that 88 or 89?
88, or is that what it is? That far into it? Yeah, probably. That RoboCop's hardcore though, as far as the violence in it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's graphic. It is 1987. Yeah.
87. See, I thought.
Think about But it's weird though because you look at these, someone's just riding their asses, I think. But Friday the 13th Part 7 was heavily
And
censored.
yeah,
I mean, I don't even like the way that it's edited now. It's one. It would be a lot better, but the edits look like a television edit. It's like you're watching it. It looks like it's edited for television. Like someone's about to get killed and it just cuts. It's like what happened? I don't even know if they really died or not. What's going on? You know?
yeah, I have to look at my work print again. I got my work print maybe 8, 9 years ago, and I haven't seen it since then.
They have yeah, on YouTube you can actually watch the deleted scenes. Now some of them are probably better. They're deleted, but some of the stuff would added a lot to it because it's just so it's just weird to me when like when you see something that you just if you don't know if it's not obvious that the person died in the scene because they had to cut something out. I mean that's not cool. You know you need to see the person. You need to know that they really died because a lot of times in these films, like they'll come back if they like say for Paul. You don't see him get killed, and you also don't see that other girl, not Vicky,
Terry.
Terry get killed. But the Terry doesn't come back. You never see her body, I don't think. But then like Paul, he looks like he gets jumped on and he fights, wrestles Jason. But you don't see him get killed, and then he shows back up later. But that may or may not have been in dreams. But but usually when you see somebody and you don't see them get killed all the way gruesomely, and you don't see their eyes open or just in there bleeding and they're done, then you think, okay, that person might just pop back up again.
Hmm. Good point. I didn't think about
That's
that.
yeah, that's, you know,
Okay.
man, so yeah, 1988. The New Blood was 1988, but somebody was just all up on him for that. Especially with RoboCop got away with it, what it got away with.
Yeah.
They're going to censor Friday the 13th 7, just because they didn't like a slasher film,
They like slasher films. Horror films got a bad rap in the late 80s, dude. They got a bad rap.
Yeah,
And it wasn't just Friday 13th. There was a lot of them where the censors took just. And
yeah, yeah,
because they were low budget and didn't have a huge studio backing them and going in there and fighting the censors, they just said, whatever, we'll just cut it. And
yeah, yeah, yeah. They had no choice, and a lot of it's unfair in a way, but even now, I think they have to deal with it some, but at least they like you don't feel like now I think they shoot it in a way so if they have to cut stuff that it looks like a complete movie and not like something missing from it.
yeah, yeah. So, all right. So, do you have any final words about Friday the 13th Part 2?
I don't have anything else at this point. No.
All right, everyone out there listening, we usually rate the films between 1 and 5 stars, one being poor and 5 stars being amazingly excellent. Where on the spectrum, Dave, do you put Friday 13th Part 2?
I put it about 3.5 stars on this one. I would have rated it a lot lower, I think, earlier in my life, because Jason doesn't have the hockey mask on. But I think it's strong as far as it is the second film. It does copy a little bit of the format of the first one, but it does add new stuff to it, and it's also quite suspenseful as it goes on. And I do like the final girl, Jenny, is pretty strong character in the film.
Yeah, I'm going to give this movie a 3. My opinion, hasn't really changed all that much. As of the final girls for like the first 3 movies, Jenny was always my favorite. The third film being the weakest for me. I like Jenny the most out of all these films, and I like the whole setup. I've always liked the setup of them doing the little campfire and then telling the myth and legend of Jason.
Yeah, yeah,
I've always
cool
loved that
sequel.
aspect of the
Yeah,
movie. I have a lot less fond memories of the third one. And the first one I've seen enough to mostly because Tom Savini did the amazing effects for. And of course, Kevin Bacon dies in it. And Kevin Bacon's always been one of my favorite actors. Stuff like
yeah.
that.
That was way too early in that film, though. It'd been better if he was in it more.
Back then, he was a new actor, and
Yeah,
he was a rough and tumble new actor. So it's
yeah,
okay if he dies early. He still has one of the better death scenes
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
All right. So with that, we're going to end this episode of Conversations in Horror, which highlights Friday the 13th Part 2, which is part of our Friday the 13th celebration this year. We hope that you enjoyed this and you will seek out some of our previous episodes and also check out our sister podcast, Conversations in 4Color, which is on graphic novels, manga, and comic books. It is our Patreon exclusive one, so you'll have to be a subscriber to listen to that one. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, do that thing you do with your favorite podcast, because this podcast is on all your favorite podcast apps, Spotify, and YouTube. From everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment, we want to thank you, Dave, for joining us this week, and we want to thank you all out there listening to our podcast, and we hope that you will continue to do so. Enjoy the rest of your Friday the 13th. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.